Should you try to develop killer instinct? I'm Tony. Welcome back to Streetball Strategies.
Killer instinct, yeah, you think you want it. Sharper than a blade, but can cut it, flaunt it. It's not just the buckets, it's the rhythm, the vibe. Earn through the struggle, not a thing you buy.
Today we're talking about killer instinct, basketball killer instinct. And the question of what is it, and should you try to use it, develop it, and make it part of your game as a player? In this video, we're gonna talk about defining what killer instinct is, because I'm big on definitions on this channel, because if you watch the sports shows on TV or whatever, ESPN, they will bring up a topic or a subject that they're going to debate, but then they just sort of get into the debate about whatever it is, but there's never any really conclusion or answer, because number one, it's a daily show, and meaning they have to fill time for a show that takes 2 or 3 hours, 5 days a week. That's a lot of time to fill, so they don't really ever have to come up with an actual answer, because they're just looking to fill that huge amount of time day after day, week after week. And so they never really define what they're talking about. For instance, if they're talking about the greatest player in the current NBA, they will debate who that player is, but there will never be an answer. One, because it's all about opinion and what you personally consider to be the greatest, but they could have at least a closer answer. They could narrow it down if they all agreed on what's the actual definition of great. If they did that, then they could set the parameters for what the topic or the subject is, and then they could actually at least get closer to answering the question. So that's what I like to do on this channel, which is start out the video by defining what I'm talking about. So by the end, at least you have some kind of better idea of what my answer actually is. And hopefully by doing that, it can help you. So we're going to define what I consider to be killer instinct. And then we're going to talk about, okay, within that definition, should you even try to develop that and have that killer instinct out here at the park in your game? And then if you decide that, yeah, you do want to try to incorporate that into how you play, then how can you actually go about doing that? So let's get into killer instinct, and should and how do you incorporate it into your game out here. In terms of definition, I think it's a good place to start with the most common and obvious examples of killer instinct. And I think those probably are, for most players, are the examples of Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant. Now, they happen to be some of my favorite players, but the fact that they have killer instinct and they're probably the most notorious examples of killer instinct, that's not the main reason. That's not part of the main upper tier echelon reasons of why they're my favorite players, but there's no denying that that killer instinct does factor into that for me somewhere. So using them as the examples of the most common notorious killer instincts in NBA and basketball history, my definition for killer instinct is taking over a game from your teammates and just sort of deciding that you're going to take control away from your teammates. So something's happening in the game, you're losing, or maybe you're not even losing yet. Maybe the game just started and you just decide that from this moment on, I make all the decisions. I'm judge, jury, and executioner. Everything that the team does, or at least the biggest decisions, the biggest things that take place on the court, are going to happen from my decisions. I decide what happens for my team. Whether my teammates like it or not, I'm going to make these decisions and I'm going to execute them because I feel that it's in the team's best interest that I do so. That's killer instinct to me. There's something inside of you that says, I need to take over, I need to take control because it's what's best for my team, even if my teammates don't like it. And the biggest reason why Jordan and Kobe are the biggest examples of that killer instinct is because they do it from the most common, obvious standpoint and perspective of killer instinct, which is scoring the basketball. But I think to think that killer instinct only applies to scoring is narrow-minded. That's thinking like inside the box. Now, the reason killer instinct is most closely aligned with scoring the basketball is because that's the biggest, most significant way to influence the way the game goes and whether or not you're successful as a teammate. But it's not the only possible way to have and display killer instinct. Every other position on the court, any other position, any other role can have a killer instinct as well. Like for me, I've always been a pass-first point guard. I'm definitely not a scorer. Definitely not in the vein of Jordan or Kobe, but in terms of like killer instinct, I can make that decision, like I'm going to take over the game. I'm going to make decisions for my team. I'm going to execute those decisions. I'm just going to do it by distributing the basketball. And I'm going to do it in a way that I see best fit for the team, whether my team likes it or not. Now, scoring and passing are probably much higher and much more significant in terms of the impact it can have on your teammates and thus on the game. But you can be and have a killer instinct from other positions on the court as well. Like you can have a killer instinct for rebounding the ball, a la Dennis Rodman, right? That's obviously super rare, but Rodman did it. He's the best in history at doing it. So if he can do it, then theoretically someone else in history will be able to do that again. So you can have a killer instinct on rebounding. You can definitely have a killer instinct when it comes to like defense, because while yes, defense can definitely have aspects of skill and learned ability, the majority of defense is all about hustling and effort and energy. And so you can be a killer instinct defensive player. Like anybody can do that in terms of energy and effort and putting out the energy so anybody can have and be a killer instinct when it comes to defense, because it's all about putting out the effort to do so. Now, in the case of defense, because you only have so much influence on the game and your teammates, you can't really control the game as much. But if it's like an end game situation, if you decide like, okay, it's the end of the game, it's a close game, maybe you gamble on a steal that you shouldn't, or if you do gamble, like maybe you get the steal and it completely turns the tide, and because of that you win the game and you're the hero. Or, very possible as well, you miss the steal and the other team scores and now everything's in the other team's favor and it's all your fault because you tried to turn on your killer instinct in that possession on defense and you made a mistake. My point is, yes, scoring and then passing are the most significant ways to flex killer instinct, but they're not the only possible ways. You can influence the game in other ways with a killer instinct from more than just a scoring and passing standpoint. But the definition still stands where you're deciding that it's on you. You've taken all the decision making away from your teammates and decided you're going to make all the decisions. You're going to execute those decisions. And it doesn't matter what your teammates think. You're going to do it because you think it's best for you to do that. So now that I've given you my definition of what I think killer instinct is, now let's talk about, should you even try to incorporate that and develop that as part of your game? You can probably tell by my tone of voice that I'm not all that supportive and encouraging for players to run out here and immediately start working on trying to be the basketball killer that they see on TV every now. And the reasons for that is, first of all, it's rare. There's only two big notorious figures in NBA history that we immediately associate with having a killer instinct, and that's Kobe and Michael. And then if you think about like today's current NBA, yeah, every NBA team has a star who's a star of their team. But just because you're the star of the team doesn't inherently mean that that player has killer instinct, especially not the kind of killer instinct that we classically think of in the vein of Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. Because if Kobe and Michael are like the gold standard of killer instinct, almost nobody else in NBA history has gotten even close to them. And not that like players need to or should, it's just like they're the gold standard of that very specific thing, and they're the only two, and there's been like 5,000 NBA players in NBA history, and those are the two gold standards. If you talk about current NBA teams, just because you're a star of an NBA franchise doesn't mean that you have anywhere near that kind of gold standard killer instinct level. In fact, I think I could make the argument, I'm not going to, but I could probably make the argument that there's maybe there's like a handful of players in the NBA that even have anywhere near that realm of killer instinct. That's the gold standard. And that's 5 players out of 500 or however many players there are in the NBA. That's how rare killer instinct is. So if it's that rare on the biggest, most talented level in basketball, how much more rare is it going to be out here at your local park or playing recreationally? And part of the reason it's so rare is because I believe that there's only really 2 ways to have and or develop killer instinct, which is you're either born with it, a la Jordan and Kobe and those upper echelon kind of players that we associate with killer instinct. For Kobe and Michael Jordan, they were born that way. That was their lifestyle. It wasn't just the way they played basketball, it's the way their mind worked on and off the court every second of their lives. They were born that way. They were born with that very specific talent. And just most players aren't. Even most players in the NBA just aren't. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Killer instinct is like a very small niche ability to have. So most players just aren't born with it, but most players can develop it to at least a certain degree, even out here at the park. Like everybody can work on it and develop it, but it's because of how niche it is and how extreme it is to actually become good at doing. You have to go through a very long, arduous process over a long period of time just to get relatively good at it. Because when, especially like newer, younger players fantasize about, oh yeah, I wish I could do that. I wish I could be the Kobe, Michael Jordan-esque kind of players that have that killer instinct. They glamorize it thinking that it's all good and all positive. And when you see all the highlights of these players making these great decisions at key moments in games and being the hero, it's like, yes, I want to do that too. Except for even those players failed and made so many mistakes in other games and other instances and situations where they tried to flex their killer instinct, made a bad decision, and they lost because of it. It's just the rarest of the rare players that from time to time can actually make the good decisions at the right time to be able to display and flex their killer instinct. But much of the time, when they try to do that, even the best, most rarest players still make terrible mistakes in endgame crunch time clutch moments where they end up losing and making a mistake. But at least they tried, but still, like, it's not like, oh yeah, just because you decide that you're going to have a killer instinct doesn't mean automatically you take over and are the hero every time. So killer instinct is glamorized as if it's this superpower that you can just turn on and off. And whenever you decide to use it, you're always the hero and you never make any mistakes. And that just isn't true. Being able to make those right plays at the right times because you make the correct decisions for your team at the kind of the games on the brink of winning or losing kind of moments, being able to do that and be relatively good at it, meaning like you make a little bit better decisions a little more often than you make the bad decisions. Just getting to that point for the best players is a really difficult process that takes a long time and tons of effort to get there. So when I say, should you try to actually incorporate being that kind of killer instinct kind of player? Part of it is, do you want to take the time and effort to do that? Because doing so, it sounds good, like to put yourself through that journey to get there. That sounds good, and there's nothing inherently bad or wrong about trying to go through that process. But you have to keep in mind, doing that is going to take away time and effort you could be putting into other aspects of your game. And if you're just not the kind of person who was born to have or use a killer instinct, but you're trying so hard and putting so much time and effort into developing it, maybe you're taking away time and effort you could be putting into other parts of your game where you could be actually making actual significant progress, but you're not, because instead of putting time and effort towards stuff that you could actually be using and building, you have glamorized killer instinct so much that you're putting that extra time and effort into trying to develop your killer instinct when you don't really have it to use or flex no matter how much you try to develop it. Also, you have to think about your killer instinct and your ability to take over the game and make all of the decisions and be judge, jury, and executioner for your team. You should really think about that from your teammates' perspective, because notoriously, Jordan and Kobe, the first half of their careers, they were born killers, basketball assassins. They couldn't help it. They're the best, most vivid example of that. For the first half of their careers, their teammates despised them, or at least despised playing with them, because they're these younger players. Like if you're 6 years in to the NBA when Jordan or Kobe join your team, and relatively immediately they start trying to flex their killer instinct by taking all of the decisions away from you and the rest of your teammates so that they can carry the team to victory, and in doing so, they make a lot of mistakes and you lose directly because of them trying to flex their killer instinct. You're probably going to despise those teammates, those young rookie teammates trying to make those decisions and show how amazing their killer instinct is. And when we talk about playing basketball out here recreationally, a lot of us do it for a big reason being reputation, trying to build your reputation around your city, your town, your neighborhood, or at least your park. Reputation can have a lot of why players play recreational basketball. And if you're a newer, younger player and you're trying to flex being a killer instinct kind of player, and you're still in the first half of your recreational career, you're just going to make so many mistakes. And you're going to be in the midst of trying to develop your killer instinct. It's very possible, maybe even probable, that you're just going to build a reputation for yourself that, you're the selfish player who tries to take over a game by yourself and make all the decisions on your own. And you just make so many bad, stupid mistakes that now you're creating the reputation of being a selfish player who just makes bad mistakes at the worst times. Sure, sometimes it'll work out for you, but when the ratio is 8 times out of 10, you make a bad decision and your teammates lose and get frustrated and embarrassed by how badly they lost because of your decision to try to take over the game with your killer instinct, that's going to destroy your reputation out here. Sure, you can work on it over time and improvement and improve it and bring it back and just show everybody oh, you doubted me back in the day when I was first trying to learn how to do this, but now I have a much better understanding. But that's all good. It's just going to take a long time, and you building this terrible reputation and then having to tear it back down and build it back. And it's just going to take a whole lot of time and a whole lot of effort, which is fine, but do you really want to go through that? And that's going to be up to you to decide, is it important for you and your game and your personality to go through that and try to build having a killer instinct into your game or not? Let's end by talking about how you can go about developing a killer instinct if you decide that you are going to put the time and effort into trying to incorporate it into your game. This is one of the many topics where I have to say I can't give any specifics about how to train this because I don't know you and I don't know your game. I don't know your goals. I don't know your strengths or weaknesses. So specifically, I can't tell you how to go about training it, but I can at least give you some food for thought that I think can help. Starting with the idea that whether or not you have a killer instinct and how well you're able to use it is pretty much mostly a psychological tool and ability. It's a mindset that you're either born with or you develop. So since it's mostly psychological, what I think only makes sense is to address it from a physical and mental standpoint in terms of how you're going to try to train your killer instinct and make it better. Starting with, and probably primarily with, do you have the tools to even use that psychology? Meaning, okay, you've decided that for whatever reason, it's best for you to take over the game and make all of the decisions. Okay, but you can attempt to do that, but do you have the tools to get the job done? Physically, can you do it? Are you physically prepared to do it? Do you have the physical abilities to actually execute taking over the game and making all of those decisions? Because if you don't, then you don't have any business actually trying to do that unless you're gonna do it from a completely coaching standpoint. But if you're gonna I'm the one that's gonna make the plays, I'm the one that's gonna score, I'm the one that's physically gonna take over the game and execute my decision, that's okay, that's fine, but do you have the physical tools and abilities to actually get it done? Because if you don't have the speed, the agility, the quickness, the jumping, the stamina, the conditioning, to the strength to go about executing whatever it is that you've determined that you need to execute, it's not going to matter if you just magically decide to take over the game if you can't actually physically implement the decisions that you have deemed appropriate. Because like I said earlier, when people think about killer instinct, they think about themselves like taking over the game from a physical standpoint. If you're me and you're a pass first point guard, I just got to worry about, can I get the ball to where I want it to go and the teammates that I want it to go to at the right time and right situation. And that they are the ones that have to do all the physical, actual scoring. But most people try to flex their killer instinct purely from a scoring standpoint. So if that's you and that's what you're going to try to do, you have the physical tools to actually get it done. If you don't, well, that's something that you're going to need to figure out what you need to train, and then how you're going to train it, and then how you're going to use those tools that you're developing to incorporate them into flexing your killer instinct. And the same principle applies when it comes to mentally. Like, okay, you've decided that you're going to take over the game, and maybe you even have the physical tools to get it done, but do you know how? Like, do you have a game plan? Do you have a strategy? Do you know how to strategize against the other team, especially since you're going to do it by yourself because you're the one making all of the decisions? If you're going to be making the decisions, you better understand what it takes to make at least good, positive estimated guesses at how the other team is going to react to the decisions that you're trying to execute. If you don't mentally have that game plan in your mind of like, okay, this is what I'm going to try to do. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, here's plan B, here's plan C. If you don't have that kind of mental fortitude yet, then you deciding that you're going to take over the game and be the man and the hero, it's probably not going to happen if you don't know how to execute whatever it is you're trying to execute. Even if you have the physical tools to do it, like if you're like, okay, I'm going to get open to shoot this three-pointer to give my team a 2-point lead at the end of this game. Okay, maybe even if you have the physical ability to shoot that 3-point shot from wherever it is that you're going to shoot it from, do you have the ability to get open? Do you have the ability to shoot with a hand in your face? Do you have the ability to release the ball in a way where it's not going to be blocked, or there's not going to be some kind of interference that's going to throw off your shot? Like, do you have the ability to plan how you're going to actually execute getting to that 3-point shot that you can physically make, but if you can't get to your spot that you need to get to in order to execute it because you don't know how to get there because you don't have a game plan or a strategy to get there and execute, then your decision to take over the game doesn't really matter. Do you see what I mean by when you decide to try to develop that killer instinct? It's a long, arduous process because you have to learn and develop not only the physical aspect of the game, but the mental aspect of the game, and then learn from experience when you should turn on and try to use and flex that killer instinct. Because unless you're born with it, like the very rare players are, not only are you not probably going to be able to use that killer instinct the entirety of the game, you're not going to want to, because that's going to isolate you from the rest of your teammates when you're the one making all of decisions all game long, every game. You're probably just not going to want to do that. You're going to ostracize yourself out here by doing that. So you're going to need to learn how and when to turn on and use that killer instinct. Like, when is it appropriate? When is it not? Like, how and when you should do that. Getting that experience is going to take a long time. And in the process of doing that, you're going to be trying to learn and develop the physical and mental abilities required to execute that killer instinct once you finally start to learn when it's appropriate to use it. Not only that, but like, it's the idea is like it's just a switch, and you just turn it on when you need it and you turn it off when it's done, and you can just use it at will whenever you want to use it. That's the ideal fantasy way of using it. But number one, it's almost impossible to get there because that's an extreme ability to have that most players just can't develop. And then even if you can get close to it, it's so difficult to execute because for you to take over the entire, your team's entire half of the game and to have it all come together and all work out is so complicated and complex, and that it's just not gonna all come together very often. It's kind of like in baseball, if you hit 300, that makes you a really good hitter. It's the same thing of like trying to execute and use killer instinct out here. Like, if it works out in your favor 1 out of 3 times, that's amazing. Like, if you're the typical kind of recreational basketball player who plays a lot of games very often, and let's say you play 100 games a week. If you decide to take over a game 5 times out of that 100, and 2 or 3 times out of that 5 times it actually works in your favor, that's amazing. That's a great percentage for killer instinct to actually work out. And that's assuming that the players you're playing with and against y'all are all on the same level. It doesn't count if you're 16 and you're playing against a bunch of 12-year-olds and you're clearly better than them. Like, in that scenario, that doesn't count because you're just better. Like, if you're all on the same level, or ideally you're playing with and against players that are at least a little bit better than you, that 2 or 3 times where your killer instinct actually works out, that's an amazing percentage for that situation. But usually for most players to get into that kind of situation, it's just going to take such a long time because it takes so much work, so much effort, so much studying, so much experience to get there. It's only up to you whether or not it's worth it to put yourself through that time and effort. So I want to thank you guys for watching. If you like this video, if you found it helpful or interesting at all, then that's great, and please subscribe to the channel. And let us know down in the comments, what do you think of killer instinct? Do you think it's something that can be developed rather easily? Do you think it's something that more than just a few rare players are born with? What is your take on killer instinct? And what do you think about using it and developing it? But before you comment, make sure you hit that thanks button down below, because not only does hitting that thanks button support the channel, but it also will highlight any comment you make, making it stand out from any other comment in the comment section. So for anyone that does hit that thanks button, know I genuinely appreciate it. As always, like, share, comment. Like I said, make sure you hit that notification bell so you're notified whenever any video goes live on this channel. And until then, I'll see you guys next week.
Long road, long nights, bricks on the climb, experience the teacher, patience the grind. Killer instinct, yeah, you think you own it. Sharper than a blade, but can cut it, flown it. It's not just the buckets, it's the rhythm, the vibe. Earned through the struggle, not a thing you buy. It's the look in your eye when the game's on lock. It's the time you spend perfecting your shot. But the same fire burns if you stoke it wrong. It's a love-hate bond, where do you belong?